In this video, I'm going to go over with you exactly how to develop an unbreakable body. Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm Dr. Dave. Welcome back to this section of the Unbreakable Body course and also being unbreakable. In this section, we're going to dive into the exact fundamentals you need in order to function in your body, the exact fundamentals to create functioning in your body. If you're curious of what that is and how to even get there, go back to the first lesson in the course Being Unbreakable and you'll be able to see it there. So what I want you to think about when you are developing function in your body is what we talked about prior. So if you consider function is what we're going after, there's entropy and then enthalpy, and then they create this cycle, right? This is the cycle of life. This is how life exists. All of life exists because of this. All of life functions, rather, because of this. Because there's entropy, which is going order to disorder, and then enthalpy, which is taking energy from the universe and putting it into order. So this is like how molecules are created. It's literally like this cycle. And in the middle is energy is just being exchanged. So that's just literally just being exchanged. So in order for us to function, we just, in our physical self, in our physical body, we just have to make sure that we're balanced in the energy component of that. And the way we do that is by setting ourselves up with some basic physical practices. So the first thing I want you to consider too is if you want to be your healthiest version, if you want to be your healthiest self, most vital self, and we talked about this in Being Unbreakable in the first lesson, is of course you have to adapt. You have to evolve towards a specific end. You have to set a goal out in the distance, and you have to try to achieve it. That's first and foremost. All of life wants to thrive. Period. Right? So you have to set a goal and to move towards it. Okay. In order for you to move towards it, you have to adapt, so that you can ultimately evolve, so you can achieve it. So, perfect example is like if you want to run a marathon and you've never ran before, you literally have to adapt yourself to be able to run a marathon. So the way you adapt yourself is that you face challenge. So it's an adaptation is challenge. So you're just constantly facing challenge. And then that's just like from the physical perspective. You could also face challenge mentally. You could also face challenge spiritually. You could also face challenge emotionally. All of these different ways to face challenge. You can face challenge in your business. You can face challenge in your relationships. Again, that just creates adaptation. Now, in order for us to adapt, we must ultimately function. Again, we talked about this in the video in Being Unbreakable. So, in order for us to function, we need to know what causes entropy and what causes enthalpy. Well, entropy and enthalpy are constant. They're cumulative. They're effortless. They are always going on. In fact, actually, enthalpy, I should not say, is not effortless. It takes energy to put energy together. But then you get kinetic energy. But the point here is that what I want you to think about is that entropy is exacerbated. It's sort of like diesel to the fire. This is literally actually like the example of fire. The three forms of stress is like diesel to the fire. So if we know what three forms of stress are and how they affect us physically, and we can take ourselves away from them, then we can ultimately become a more functioning human. So the three kinds of stress are this: mental, emotional, physical, and chemical. We talked about this briefly in the other video, in the first video in Being Unbreakable. So if you're curious about that, go back. But the three kinds of stress are this: mental, emotional stress is stress from the outside world, but it also has to do with perspective. So having an unbreakable mind is as important to your physical health as having an unbreakable body. So if you want to have an unbreakable body, like that's great, but if you don't touch on the mind component, you are actually lost. Same thing with spirit. So you have to have a combination of all three. So chemical stress is the stress of the environment around us. For example, if you live downstream from a sanitation plant, and you got a bunch of junk getting into your water and you get sick because of that, now that's chemical stress. In fact, perfect example, I grew up in Milwaukee, which if you remember in the 90s, there was this big outbreak because literally the sanitation plant let go of a bunch of sewage into Lake Michigan, and then they took that sewage from Lake Michigan and then they put it back into the water system because that's where people get water from in Milwaukee. A bunch of people got sick, and so you created chemical stress, or there was chemical stress in the water supply, a thing called cryptosporidium, and it was horrible. I got it. Just putting it in the water supply. So that's why I'm a big fan of drinking spring water. So side note, physical stress is stress on the system from, it could be even from working out, but just from everyday life. So we're going to talk specifically about physical stress and how that affects you and how to set yourself up for success without having to deal with so much physical stress. So there's 3 forms of physical stress that I want you to think about. And this is actually, once we understand the 3 forms of physical stress, then we're going to actually be able to optimize. We're going to be able to optimize for our physical self and develop an unbreakable body. All right. So 3 forms, and I call them 3 Ps. One of them is what I call joint position. Joint positions, posture, and then patterns, movement patterns. So movement. So the 3 Ps, 1, 2, and 3. So again, this is movement patterns, this is posture, and then joint positions. So if any one of these is off, now we're going to see more stress on the system. So more stress on the system then requires that you have more recovery, which then there's going to be more breakdown, which then there's going to be more chaos. Perfect example, joint positions. If your joint positions are off, for instance, like your fingers, and your fingers can't move, or your feet, if you're walking funny, right? You're going to create a bunion formation on that inside of your foot, and now you're going to have more breakdown in that area, which then is going to, because of the way nature works, is going to try to adapt to that dysfunction, and then it's going to lay down more bone, and then you're going to have more dysfunction and more bone and more dysfunction, and then you're going to be less adaptable, and you're not going to be able to run that marathon that you want to run. So what we have to understand is that each joint in your body, let's say it's like joints in my hand or my elbow or my shoulder or my spine, because spine's kind of a big deal, we can talk about that later, is that if any one of those joints is misaligned, I'm going to use the word misaligned, what's going to happen is that they're not going to move well, and all of a sudden, that's when you're going to get that irritation, that grinding, that arthritis that you've seen, along with, again, adding in that idea of inflammation from chemical stress, from food and from drinks and from all those other things. But if you're not moving well, what's going to happen is that you're going to have more entropy, more breakdown on your system, and now you're not going to be functioning as well. So the first thing I always do in the morning is I always just take care of my joint positions. How do I do that? I simply just do mobility work and stretching. That's it, dynamic range of motion. So in order to fix this, here's the fix. It's just mobility and dynamic range of motion stretches. So I'm just working on my tissues, I'm working on my joints, I'm making sure everything's in alignment, and just put myself in a better position, each one of my joints. That's super important. The other thing I do, and this is super important, and this is, obviously I am a chiropractor, so I'm super interested in alignment, is I personally go to my own chiropractor every other week. So every 2 weeks, I get my body checked for alignment, period. It's just the way I work. Just what I do, because I'm interested in functioning, not in feeling a certain way or looking a certain way. Again, every 2 weeks I go see the chiro. Simple as that. Okay, number 2, posture. In order for me to work on my posture, think about this. If I stand up right, if I face the camera here, my shoulders want to be aligned. You can't see my hips, but my hips want to be aligned. Down the center of mass, I want to be equal bilateral. From the side, I want to be equal, right? So my shoulders don't want to be rolled forward. My ear doesn't want to be forward. So you get a lot of texting neck, right? People are like looking down and they don't realize that they're putting a ton of stress on their spine, on their spinal cord. Or you see, I'm kind of sticking my booty out here. You see like the hyper CrossFitter that's just like a lot of muscle mass and they got a big booty, but their spine is compressed on that back end, right? So if your posture is off, now the forces of gravity moving down this way, right, towards the earth, is going to cause us to break down, take on more force just by basic physics. And now we're going to experience more entropy, more breakdown, and then we're not going to be able to recover as well because our posture is off, which is going to affect how we move and then how our joints work. So now you kind of see these are all connected as well. So in order for me to improve my posture, all I do is just a simple form of yoga, which I call Unbreakable Yoga. So I just do yoga for like 10 minutes every day. That's it. I just do a simple yoga practice every single day. Typically, when I'm teaching yoga, I'm typically going to actually add in all of these. So I just call it Unbreakable Yoga. But the easiest practice is just get a number of specific movements down, postures, in order for you to increase your posture. And by simple yoga, you're going to actually improve your posture because the joints are going to be elongated, tissues will be elongated, your spine will be more erect, your body will be able to hold itself up with more ease rather, and you're going to be in a better posture. Okay, number 3, movement patterns. What is a movement pattern? A movement pattern is obviously, in the most simplistic way, how to move, how you move. But there's 2 forms of movement patterns. Form 1 is primal movements. And form 2 is power movements. And a primal movement is a way that your body learned how to move without anybody telling you how to move. So these are as follows. If you have any kids, you've seen this in them, which is rolling. So they roll their eyes and they roll their head and they roll over, then extending, and then it's crawling, and then it's lunging, and then it's standing, and then it's squatting, and then it's walking, and then it's running. So it goes in that order. You don't have to memorize that, but do know that if you don't, for instance, if you go to a workout program and you never learned how to crawl well as a child, and you start squatting and your movement patterns are off, what's going to happen now is that you are going to increase more stress on your system because your primal movement pattern of crawling is not functional, and so your squatting pattern will be off. And so in order for you to develop an unbreakable body, you have to start with rolling and then extending and then crawling and then reaching and then lunging, etc. So start in that order. So the way I do that and I increase my primal movements is simply by doing primal movement flows. Every single day. So I do this basic fundamental practice every single day. And you're probably wondering, what are the power movements? I'll get to that. But all I do every single day, I work on mobility, dynamic range of motion. I work on some stability in that as well to increase my positions. I work on some yoga, and I work on some primal movement patterns. And as I do that, as I get better and better and better in this, that is how I start to increase. I reduce the amount of stress from the physicality. I reduce the amount of stress, reduce the amount of breakdown on my system. I actually set myself up for success because now I'm functioning, and now I can go into my adaptation, into my stressor, aka working out. But without this, if I didn't do that every single day, my body would break down. And you're gonna start noticing that. Now here's the funny challenge. As you're in this Unbreakable Body program and you start getting these practices down and you start implementing them, do them for 90 days. Just do them every day. Give yourself a good challenge. And then I actually want you to stop doing them for 7 days and then just see what happens. You're gonna start feeling tighter. You're gonna start feeling like you can't move as well. You're gonna start noticing like things are like just off. It's sort of like if you went 30 years without brushing your teeth and you all of a sudden start brushing your teeth for 90 days and you stop brushing your teeth again, you're gonna be like, oh, this is gross. It's because your body wants to move this way. It wants to feel this way. It wants to be able to function this way, and then you can get into the challenges of life. Now, again, I know you're already thinking, well, what about power pattern? What are you talking about power? I want to know about that. I'll get to that here in a second, I promise. But the key component, the absolute key that I want you to understand is that just like what we're talking about in the first video, is that you must take care of these things. You must take care of these things on a daily basis if you want to function so that you can be more adaptable, so you can evolve as a human. If you do that, then you will become unbreakable. But if you stop doing that, that's when you become broken. Period. Why? Because of entropy. Entropy exists. Always was, always will be. It's constant, it's cumulative, it's effortless, it's breakdown. It's the reason for all human suffering. We're all afraid of entropy. We're all afraid of death. We're all afraid of dying. There's like this mini death, literally every breath. It's like a mini death. It's like a mini death. You're always giving it away. Just breathe. That's it. Okay, now let's talk about power patterns, and then we're going to sum this up one more time for you. Power patterns are really the way we develop power as a human. Now, these power patterns, this is important, I typically will use these in order to actually start to adapt myself through challenge to weightlifting. Power patterns are super simple. Again, I want to clarify. Primal patterns, you don't have to use any weight. You're just on the ground, you're moving around, you're rolling, you're reaching, you're crawling, you're squatting. It's basically calisthenics at the end of the day. Power patterns is where we start to develop strength, we can adapt. And so I'll actually use power patterns in my programming for when I'm programming for myself and for the world, so that you can actually start to use these power patterns the way you were meant to use, the way you were meant to function as a human, and actually get more out of both primal and power patterns. Okay, what I'm going to do is, before we get into power patterns, is I'm going to get into that in the next video. But for right now, I want you to understand exactly that you must take care of your joint positions by doing mobility, dynamic range of motion. Take care of your posture by doing some yoga. Take care of your movement patterns by doing some primal movement flows every single day. And then you're going to start seeing you're going to be functioning better, and you're going to start adapting, and then you're going to start evolving as a human. Okay, in the next video, I'm going to dive into power patterns, exactly what they are, how to use them, how to incorporate them into your workout regimen, and if you are taking on the wrong forces, if you're not moving well, how to fix them. All right, so we'll see you in the next lesson.